Gremlins! I needed an easy video to make this week, so I've returned to a random aesthetic generator and Pinterest to find a couple interesting looking photos to turn into characters. It actually took quite a while with the aesthetic generator to find some promising aesthetics, but in the end, my quest gave me a picture of old books and a magnifying glass on a desk, and a white bunny with a pink flower on its head. I plan to use these images to draw two characters as a couple, as I've now done a couple times before. The first step is deciding the pose. The pose I chose has the bunny-inspired character on the left, holding onto the arm of the shorter book-inspired character, who with their other hand is holding a cane. I wanted a pose reminiscent of being escorted to a fancy event, and I really like what I landed on. Figuring out the legs, especially the feet stepping forward slightly, was a challenge, but I got somewhere in the end. As I usually do with these videos, I needed to come up with some names for these characters to make referring to them throughout the video easier. The bunny-inspired girl will be named Thea, and her partner, the book-inspired character, is Darcy. Darcy is dressed in very dark academia-inspired clothing. They're wearing an Argyle sweater vest over a collared shirt with dramatic poofy sleeves, and have slim pants and formal shoes. Thea, meanwhile, is inspired by Lolita fashion, with a petticoated cupcake skirt and lots of lace, flounces, and ribbons. Figuring out Thea's sleeves and neckline proved a little trickier than expected. I tried out a few options before deciding on puff sleeves and a high neck with a slight frill. I started my line art with Darcy. Darcy is a non-binary lesbian who dresses androgynously masculine, and their hair is short and curly, a very cute style in my opinion. Their jewelry is inspired directly from my reference photo. They have a unique dangly earring that shape is traced directly from the intricate handle of the magnifying glass, and the pendant at Darcy's throat is based on the round part of that same object. As well as these pieces, Darcy also has a septum piercing and several helix piercings, and some rings that I forgot to outline until later in the process. Thea's outfit has a whole lot of detail in the ruffles and the lace and the accessories. I'm starting from her head, where over her pigtailed hair, drawn inspired by the ears of the bunny reference photo, she has a headband decorated with a pink flower. Instead of doing all the line art of one character, then going back to the other, I've been switching back and forth every time I change line weight. I now return to Darcy then, with a thinner brush to add more details, starting with their face. A lot of the detail I'm adding is in the folds of their clothes, something I keep practicing but I'm not sure I'm getting the hang of yet. Back to Thea, an interesting element of her design is her stockings, which are fishnets with a pattern of lacy flowers. I've seen stockings like this, with wide mesh and more opaque patterns, and I think they look really cool and perfect for the aesthetic of this character. These flower patterns are inspired by the shape of the flower my reference bunny is wearing as a hat. I'm drawing these lines in dark blue, but they will get recolored to nearly white. I just don't like drawing in white because it's so hard to see what I'm doing. And I'm back to Darcy again to draw the Argyle pattern on their vest. In the past, I've drawn this pattern a few ways, but this time I'm keeping the pattern only to the center of the vest rather than the whole thing, and I think it looks better. After quickly warping the Argyle slightly so that it looks like it's worn over a 3D torso, it's now on to the coloring. I'm color picking every color possible from my reference photos, so Darcy will be in browns and creams, and Thea in pinks and greys with a hint of green. Darcy's hair is dyed because the curl texture is reminiscent of the torn edges of the book in my photo, and I wanted to show both the pale edges and dark shadows in their hair. Therefore, their roots are dark, but most of their hair has been bleached. I had a lot of fun rendering the metal in Darcy's design, color picking from the magnifying glass. I'm also really satisfied with the result. I think their jewelry really does look like old metal, shiny but tarnished and very 3D. Darcy's sweater vest is color picked from the cover of a different book in the image, and the design is almost inspired by it. Golden details on a dark red-brown background. Darcy is an archivist, working with old books, papers, and documents. They study them, preserve them, perform repairs on them, and scan them onto digital platforms for easy access to the public. Darcy is also a nerd about old books and history in general. They chose their name based on the Jane Austen character, and they will info dump about Austen or Stoker or Shelley to anyone who will listen. Most often, Thea, who loves to hear it all. Some evenings, Darcy will end up reading aloud to Thea and their cats for hours, until their voice is hoarse despite the tea they drink. Sometimes they're reading actual well-known books, other times it's passages from the documents they're studying, which Darcy found fascinating or amusing. Thea especially enjoys if they relate to fashion or illustration, and Darcy will often text Thea images of cool illustrations or prints they find at work. The one thing I couldn't color pick exactly from the image was Darcy's skin tone. I tried a lot of shades of brown from the image, but they were all too grey or blue to look like healthy human skin. Finally, I ended up tweaking one to be a little pinker and more alive, and used that to color Darcy's face and hands. I also added more dimension to the hair with another layer between the bleaching and the roots, which I think makes their hair look much better and more interesting. Finally, I gave Darcy dark brown eyes and moved on to coloring Thea. Thea's headband is colored like the flower on the bunny's head, with a pink flower and a green band like the stem. Her hair is the same color as the bunny's fur, darker at the tips of her pigtails. Thea is a concept artist for game design and a fashion content creator in her free time. She puts a lot of time into her Lolita and kawaii outfits, even sewing elements of them herself. For instance, this dress, mostly grey with pink trim, was made by Thea, much of it by hand while Darcy read or the two watched documentaries. I kept messing with the colours of this dress. The dress itself got recolored from one grey to another, and the trim and ribbons recolored much more, trying out different shades of pink and even green. I tried dark green for the shirt and petticoat, but that didn't work at all, so I recolored them to be nearly white, then very pale green, mostly white but darker in the shadows. Thea's skin tone also could not be color picked from my reference image, so again I altered a shade until it looked like pale, healthy human skin. I then remembered her jewelry existed and gave her some green and silver rings, based on the colors of the stone behind the bunny. For the rendering / shading of this image, I'm fully rendering the skin with blending and soft shadows. However, all the shadows on the clothing will be cel shaded. I think I mentioned a couple videos ago that I'm leaning toward this style over fully blended shadows, and so far at least, I'm enjoying the effect. This photo is posed as though the couple are going to a formal event. However, this is just how both of them dress on the daily. And I think being chivalrous and walking with their girlfriend on their arm gives Darcy gender euphoria, so the pair look very fancy just doing errands or going out for lunch. I'm really happy with this drawing. It was perhaps a little more detailed and a little more drawing two people in complex outfits than I should have done in a week where I'm swamped and exhausted, but I love these characters in the drawing I've created. Speaking of being swamped though, this is my last video of the year. I was planning to release a second video in December, but I'm just so busy right now between the end of term and moving apartments, and I do not have the energy for anything else. Anyway, here are the images that were my inspiration, and here is the finished art piece. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you all for the support this year, and I'll be back and hopefully a lot more energized in 2026. Until then, bye!